Hi, I'm Ray Belsky, and today we'd like to demonstrate and show you our new CRYSTAL ICE two-part epoxy casting resin. This material can be cast up to 1.5 inches thick. It takes about 3 days for it to fully cure, sometimes longer, depends on temperature. But we're going to show you some of the tricks that we've used for getting a good solid cast. One of the first things to mention is how to accurately measure. What we've done here is we've pre-marked off the container so that there's no mistakes. You've had a chance to think about it, make sure you've got your ratios right. This product is 2 to 1, 2 parts of A, 1 part of B. We also should tell you that we nitrogen pack our B part to prevent any discoloration of the epoxy hardener. So, first we're going to cast this tray, and we're going to put about 600 milliliters in here. We're going to allow this to cure, and then we're going to run it through a boiling water test. Our next project is going to be this little Christmas tree. And this has been an artificial tree that has thousands of little artificial tree limbs out of it. That's just great for catching air bubbles. So we'd like to show you how well this epoxy releases air, and you'll be able to get a beautiful pour out of this. Now, we're always going to get some air bubbles. This is hard to get away with, but we'll show you some of the tricks we've used to try and get the most successful pour going. Anyway, here we've just poured out 400 milliliters of part A. Now, one of the things we've done here is we preheated the epoxy in advance, and we've let it sit in this container for about 5 minutes, so the air bubbles that are there will release and come out rather than having mixed together. So it's a little less air that you have in the mix, so that when you go to pour it, you're going to get even less air bubbles. Okay, we've added another 200 milliliters of hardener, and we have a bit of a milky solution here. So now we're going to stir this up, and you'll see how you can see the difference between the resin and the hardener. It sort of gives a milky look to it. This is quite normal for CRYSTAL ICE. And you'll notice as you stir it, it tends to clear up. And you'll notice I'm mixing off the bottom, bringing the product up from the bottom. This is what you want to do. Just stirring around like this is the worst way you can do. Circular motions will just stratify the mix, and you'll get an uneven pour. Also, if you should see white spots in here, it could be that the epoxy may have sat and gotten cold. Now, I'm going to explain some of the cross-linking techniques later on, so you'll be able to see some of the excellent effects you'll get with this product, and very little air bubbles. Now, we did warm this epoxy up to it's over 80 degrees, so the air is releasing quite nicely. And what I'm further going to do is let this sit for about 5 minutes, so any air that's there will come out on its own. There. Okay, we've let the epoxy now sit for about 5 minutes, and we're going to pour it in to this dish. So what I'm going to do is be very careful. Make sure we've gotten rid of any little specks of dust that could have fallen in, and pour it very slowly in. And there's approximately 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is just run it over with the heat gun, and it blows out the bubbles. You got to remember, yes, you can overheat the epoxy, but it's going to cool down. And most of the air I'm seeing is floating on the surface here. That is now crystal clear, air-free. Now, one of the things that can happen is over time, when the chemical reaction takes place, you may get bubbles form because of unmixed epoxy, or the epoxy still mixing itself. Because epoxy mixes through the process of induction mixing, which is the molecules freeze themselves and knit themselves together. So they may form some reactions, and so you may get some occasional air bubbles. After allowing the mixed epoxy to sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, we're now going to pour our Christmas tree in 3 or 4 stages. For the remaining pour stages, we're going to speed up the video. There are some tiny, tiny little air bubbles part way down. Mostly in the top 1.5 inches, I can see it there. Now we've poured pretty close to 4 inches there, which is way over the recommended numbers of about 1.5 inches per pour. So we may be trapping air by the higher volume or higher and the larger depth of epoxy we put on there. Again, this product tomorrow may create little micro bubbles from the chemical reaction because epoxy, again, is an induction mixing product, and it's still mixing right now, even though we're not stirring it. It happens chemically. The 600-gram pour into a pie plate turned out flawlessly, with no hidden air bubbles on the surface or in any corners. The Christmas tree turned out quite well. Initially there were no air bubbles, but through the curing time, air bubbles developed, which we think was a reaction with the tinsel in the Christmas tree. 3 out of the 4 items poured flawlessly with no air bubbles other than the Christmas tree. Hope you've enjoyed this video, so please subscribe. If you have any comments about this video or would like to suggest topics for future videos, drop us a line at www.fiberglass.com.